watchers, welcome to Perth Watch, your horology channel broadcasting from right here in Perth, Western Australia. Today I am featuring my latest piece from StarKing watches. It comes in this, their typical drawer packaging. Now, if you follow the channel or any similar channel, StarKing is a brand which you will be no stranger to. I've reviewed quite a number of their pieces. This one is actually a little bit of a mix-up of the Invicta Pro Diver Homage, which I reviewed quite a while back and featured in some comparisons, side by side with Invicta itself. Links up the side here if you're interested to check out those older videos. This one I thought was, I think an interesting take or a bit of a mashup where they've brought in what is obviously Romega Submaster 300M elements into the watch. So without further ado, guys, let's flip the camera around and take a closer look at this watch. Alright guys, so here we have the package on the table. This is the typical cardboard that it comes in. Alright, spinability unfortunately is not fantastic because the weight is over to one side, so it kind of spins out of control. Alright, let's just take a look at what's in here. So StarKing, of course the brand name over there with the Chinese, and then in here nothing much really, just a bit of a card, microfiber tags, and then the extra links which I have taken out to size to my wrist. Okay, so just put that aside and show this particular watch to you guys in closer detail here. Just going to release the clasp there. So over here we have the StarKing automatic diver watch. This model number is AM0284. Now, otherwise I'm going to call this the StarKing Romega, and you can kind of maybe call it the Submaster or the Seamariner, whatever you want, because it is really very much a mashup between a Rolex and an Omega, isn't it? I mean, you can see it straight away. So this watch is going for retail, I think well over 100 is the MSRP, but typically this has been priced at about 75 USD whenever you look it up, particularly on sites like AliExpress. Okay, so first up, as I like to do, let's talk about the movement in here. So the movement is none other than the Seiko NH35A. Okay, just a typical one that you've seen so many times. Not going to go through all the stats, of course. You can see it down the left of screen there. In this case, the quick set date is, of course, on the 3 o'clock position with a Cyclops on top of it, and it's the typical black writing on white disc. Nothing much more special than that. Rated accuracy, as you can see, in this case, in the use over the last week, it's been running about +8 seconds per day, which is, well within the rated accuracy. So it's running fairly well, certainly within the specifications that is claimed here. Okay, so enough about movement. Let's talk about the case. The case here is 40mm in steel. I think it's 316L steel. I think in certain listings it certainly claims it's 316L steel, and it does kind of pass muster. It's not just a plated base metal like cheaper watches might be. Overall thickness to the top of the crystal and bottom of the case is 13.8, so it's slightly more chunky than some of its predecessors. 20mm lug width, of course, in this classic oyster style case, and lug to lug width of 48mm, as you would expect with a 40mm oyster style Submariner case. Overall weight on this metal bracelet is 134 grams, kind of like what it tends to be. These type of watches, a lot of them tend to be in the 120 to 140 gram range, and certainly this fits in that type of range. Right, let's talk about finishing then. The finishing is as you would kind of expect, actually. So polished bezel, circular brushing on the top of the case there, transitioning to a polished side. Okay, very obviously polished side, and then on the bottom it's got a polished screw down case back, and in this case it doesn't have brush on the bottom surface of the lugs. It actually has polished surfaces of the lugs there, with that screw down exhibition case back and screw down sign crown. Apologies, I hadn't gotten around to actually removing that blue sticker here, but you can see that there's a bit of signage on the crown there. The water rating that this watch kind of advertises at is 100 meters. So, you know, kind of they're kind of stating that you can get this in a pool without problem. Certainly most manufacturers won't recommend scuba diving with a 100-meter rated watch. You know, do it at your own risk is kind of what they're saying here. All right, this is going to screw down that crown. Sorry, that was actually left unscrewed there. Okay, so moving on to the dial then. So the dial here, I guess, is where a lot of the new action is, the new you know, work that they've done in this particular model. It's a gloss blue wave textured dial, right? Of course, this is taken from the Romega Submaster, particularly the newest model, which is actually a larger watch, but you know, they've translated that feel of that blue wave dial. This one actually does have a sunburst pattern, which is of course different to the original, but you know, kind of mimicking what they have done with their Submariner homages in the past. They've all been kind of mostly sunburst type dials. The details are printed, as has been the case in the past with their sub homages, including the chapter ring around the periphery. It's got applied indices, of course, in the style of the Submaster, including the kind of 11 pattern at the 12 o'clock position, as well as round you know, indices in the 1, 2, you know, 4, 5, 7, 8, and 10 and 11 positions. The handset is completely Omega Submaster Professional 300M, right? Skeletonized sword hands, which are slightly polished, and it's got a lollipop seconds with a lume pip, you know, to be able to see that moving around in the dark. It's got fairly standard lume, you know, not fantastic, and doesn't really last through the night. And in this case, they've actually left out the lume pip on the bezel. There isn't a lume pip there, which is slightly disappointing, I have to say, because they have done it in previous models. And I will show you a lume shot right here for you guys to see how it glows in the dark. It does glow, you know, fairly brightly when you first charge it, but as mentioned, not all the way through the night. Okay, so on top around the dial is a 120 click unidirectional dive style bezel with a metal insert, right? And it's fairly nicely done, right? That blue kind of PVD on that insert. Let's just hear how it sounds now. Very soft. They tend to be soft. That's 10 clicks. Another 10. 20 clicks. Okay, so 120 click unidirectional dive style bezel is what this is. Let's just get that back into the 12 o'clock position. Okay, and then on top of the dial is a flat mineral crystal, in this case with a Cyclops magnifier. And at least what I can say about this Cyclops, it does tend to magnify pretty well. You know, it does look like the full 2.5 magnification, which is better than a lot of kind of these low-end homages tend to do. They tend to not actually magnify very well. Okay, that's the case. Let's talk about the bezel, which is classic oyster style. Okay, nothing more than that. It does have hollow end links, right? The finishing is polish in the middle with brush sections on the sides and the 3-piece per link, and polished sides. You know, so many people tend to do that. A pushpin adjustment, and then the clasp is fully pressed metal, including the arms here are pressed metal with 4-point micro adjustment and, you know, kind of this pressed metal keeper. Nothing more than that. This is what they've provided in the past, StarKing that is, and this is exactly what they've given here. Okay, now let's just snap it on the wrist to show you guys, and there it is, the StarKing AM0284 on my 17 centimeter wrist. Fits fairly well. Right, 13.8 tall, so a little bit chunky there, but you know, the lug distance of 48 fits well, I think, on a wrist size like mine, which is relatively small, and that's how that bracelet sits. Okay, there we go. All right, so what, you know, I think are kind of the pros of this particular watch. Look, it's good looks, right? It's a bit mongrel, all right? You can say it's a bit of a kind of mashup in terms of good looks, but it is, you know, stolen, of course. You know, they haven't come up with any original design here, right? They've taken it from both Rolex and Omega. Overall, it's a pretty great value package, I have to say, right? You're getting 3160 steel, you're getting that NH35 movement. Haven't been able to confirm for sure whether it's a clone, but you know, assuming it's a real NH35, that's pretty good, right? You know, we know that that's a reliable movement, and even if it's not that accurate, it's very easy to regulate yourself to be better than that if you don't get an accurate one out of factory. I think surprisingly, these watches are fairly well engineered, right? The finishing of the case, at the $75 value is actually pretty darn good. I can't really complain, right? Of course, it's not perfect. There are, really imperfections that you can see if you look close, but $75, what more can you ask? This is actually pretty darn good, right? The links are fairly solid. Yes, it's got hollow end links, but, the bracelet links are actually not bad. And you can probably use this as a pretty good everyday beater. It will stand up, I think, to water resistant to most things that we do. And certainly I've used these watches for swimming and all that, and it hasn't been a problem so far. And one thing I would say is that they haven't emblazoned the brand on the side of the case this time, which I think many people would find positive. Okay, so that's really what I think are the good things. What are the weaknesses? Well, of course, it's an homage. So if you don't like homages, if you don't like design that has been taken from elsewhere, don't get this watch. This is not for you. I think the dial, right? I think you've seen it on some of the zoom ins. It's actually quite badly done, right? The stamping is a bit uneven. It's not sharp in any way at all, that wave texture. So this is actually relatively poor. And I think I would prefer just a flat dial that they've done in the past. This hasn't actually gone very well. As with other times that they've done this Oyster, the finishing is actually quite poor. It's quite wavy, particularly the brushing. The polish is not too bad, but the brushing is wavy. And the loom is just about worst in class. I think it's actually slightly worse than Invicta Tritnite, which I've kind of criticized over the years, but this is even slightly worse than that. And they've gone away and taken that loom pip away, which why would you do that if you want to kind of advertise this as a little bit of a dive style watch? Okay, so that's my thoughts about this watch. I thought I would kind of bring up the previous the watch as well, which is the AM0261, very, very popular, the Invicta homage, and I've reviewed this and compared this and put it side by side for you guys to see what is the comparison here. Well, look, they have really the same finishing. The in terms of the brushing and polish, segments. I'll just hold it there for you. It's exactly the same in terms of what they've chosen to do in terms of finishing, and including the clasp as well, how it's finished. Exactly the same clasp, exactly the same shape. All right, no doubt about that in my mind. The caseback execution as well, all right, just to show it to you guys here, is the same, right? Polish with exhibition caseback. The one on the right is just a smidgen thicker, I think, and I'll go into that in a little bit more slightly later. Case proportions are also exactly the same in terms of the lug to lug distance, the case diameter, all that is the same, and the bezel grip, right? Just see it side by side, is exactly the same how they've done it. Now, what are the differences? Well, the new one is 0.3 millimeters, about a third of a millimeter thicker. Don't know if that's going to be very easy to appreciate, but I think it's partly taken up by the bezel being slightly more convex and the caseback being just slightly thicker. That's my opinion. I think the actual profile of the case is identical, the case body there. Right, the other differences, right, are on the case itself is the squarer crown guards, right? There's no doubt about that, right? Look at the profile of the crown guards, just a bit squarer, and then the signage is a bit different on the newer one. They might be transitioning crowns, I suppose, in their branding. Right, and of course, I've mentioned this already, no branding emblazoned on the case side on the new one, which I think a lot of people would appreciate. I think I myself, of course, also appreciate that they haven't put StarKing like Invicta on the side of the case. The rest of the differences, of course, are going to be at the top side, right? The bezel insert, of course, is different. This one's more like an Romega Submaster font, whereas this one's a 5-digit sub type of font here, no doubt about it, I think. They've taken away the loom pip, as I mentioned, which is a minus for the new one. And then the rest of it is the dial, right? So the dial texture, of course, is there in the new one. This one is the sunburst blue. This one almost is the same dial, except they've done the stamping, and the stamping isn't well done. The indices, of course, this one's Rolex, this one's Romega Submaster. And then the handset, well, all these things I don't really need to tell you guys, right? That's more Submaster. That is, of course, classic Rolex Mercedes style hands. Okay, and then lastly, right? Last difference, the Cyclops, right? In my mind and my perception, no doubt at all that the new one magnifies a lot better than the old one. The old one isn't really 2.5 times. The new one actually looks like it does 2.5 times. So there we go, guys. My comparison of these two and the review of this watch. Just going to flip the camera around now for the wrap up. So there you go, guys. My review of the StarKing homage to the Omega Seamaster, or perhaps not. It's a little bit of a Romega, is what I'm going to start calling this. I think essentially, you know, at its core, it's actually the same watch as the previous Submariner homage. You know, the differences are really cosmetic and superficial, but let me know what you think. You know, are these design elements a little bit too weird? Does it not really go well together, or do you actually like the look? Would like to hear your thoughts on the matter. Guys, if you enjoy my videos, do consider subscribing. New content every week, always aiming to be objective and unbiased about all things horology. Thank you again for sticking with me, and as always, I'll catch you guys again next time.